Good morning, everybody. We're seeing some people still join in, but it's 8 o'clock, so we're going to try and get started. Everybody's day. Well, for those of us in New York, we have it's an early morning, so we need to get started. For some of you dialing in, it's evening or afternoon. Welcome from everywhere. Thank you for joining us. I'm Greta Larson. I'm from the private equity program, and I'm really delighted to work on this program with CMC. CMC was there. They introduced me to Juan, and we're super excited to have Juan here. Tom Monaco from CMC is going to be moderating the discussion today. So welcome, Tom, and welcome, Juan. Just wanted to remind all of you, I think that by this point we've all been to several webinars, but we have, this is Zoom, so if you can use the Q&A, this actually says chat on here, but for this webinar we're going to use Q&A. So type your questions in, and Tom is going to make sure we hit as many of the questions as we can. And so I'm going to now turn it over to Tom, who will introduce our guest. But again, thank you everybody for coming, and we're excited to have you here.
Great, thanks, Greta. On behalf of the Career Management Center, I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Juan Gómez Vega's bio was in your promotional materials for this event, which you've had the opportunity to read already, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about him, but I would just like to mention a few things, a few highlights that I think are relevant to today's session. Johnny graduated from Columbia in 2009 in the midst of the last financial crisis. And in fact, some of what Johnny's going to talk about today in terms of recruiting during challenging times comes from his own experience and learnings from that time, graduating without a job and managing what he did eventually to lead to success and managing some of the frustration of those days. Johnny did his summer internship in the summer of 2008 while he was at Columbia with Morgan Stanley in New York in IBD and with the Morgan Stanley Real Estate Fund. The summer of 2008, as many of us recall, was a time of significant transition in financial services. Bear Stearns was sold to Lehman Brothers Bear Stearns was sold to JP Morgan Chase in March for $2 a share. Lehman Brothers went bankrupt in September of 2008. As a result, many of people who did internships that summer did not convert to full-time offers. Johnny landed at Deutsche Bank. Johnny graduated without a job in 2009, landed at Deutsche Bank in 2010 in London, where he spent 5 years. Over the years, Johnny's had experience in a variety of sectors in financial services, including financial advisory, PE, VC, and real estate. So with no further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Johnny. Johnny, thanks for your time today. We will hold questions. I would like to ask that we hold questions until the end.
So thank you for the intro. Let me just pull up this, finish with the technical part of it. So my goal here today is that you, after this webinar, you feel compelled to make yourself a better candidate, work on your weaknesses, work on your strengths, and feel compelled to do the next thing, send that next email, but above all, just leave you with a positive message, not out just of being a happy flower, but actually out of, as long as you are healthy, there's a lot that you can be doing to improve your position as a finance candidate. So the goal of today's meeting is to do a half-an-hour seminar, followed by hopefully half an hour of productive Q&A with you guys. So let's turn quickly to a quick assessment of what we are seeing today. So the world is facing an unprecedented time of challenges in three aspects: economic, sanitary, and eventually political. So how each country and each province and each state deal with it will condition how we are going to recover from it and potentially deal with different political scenarios. So the main three things as I see this situation is that there's a massive GDP contraction that looks like a war-like contraction. And everyone is trying to assess right now whether we are going to have a recovery as a V, as a U, as a W, or whichever letter you want. We have seen, the good thing is that we have seen an aggressive fiscal and monetary response, but it's early to say if it's enough or not. The economy and employment are vulnerable. Obviously, everywhere in the world we've seen unemployment jump. Hopefully it's temporary, but we still don't know. Some European states here have been banning layoffs. But the reality is that this is not only a temporary liquidity shock, but it's also some businesses are going to see less profitability after this. We all need to be monitoring the bank's health and if there is a rise in NPLs or not. And obviously the third point I'm mentioning here, it's an obvious thing, but is that tourism, airlines, restoration, theaters, entertainment is the initial focus of Spain. Spain, where I live, is a second destination for tourists worldwide, and we are suffering a lot because it represents 20% of GDP. There's no season 2020. And it's also, this shock is affecting and accelerating some changes that have been happening already, like retail, or the changing work from home, or restoration. So all this is the 2-minute view on what's happening, which has been affecting our lives. But the message here is, don't take only the negative. As much as possible, I give these 3 messages so that the main thing that you should be doing is try to put the hat of a controlling investor and see how in all this dislocation you can find, one, how to push your career forward, because there may be opportunities that were not available before COVID, or 2, maybe you find a way to actually have a project, have an investment, and make money with it. So that's why it's not all negative. Let's look at the opportunities that come with this. But basically, if I had to be in the shoes of a job seeker now, what do we do now? No, like the initial thoughts before we go into the 4-step recruiting and networking plan is that the first thing obvious is like safety first. You need to be standing, same as the company, you need to be standing healthy, you and your family, after this, okay? The second thing I wanted to mention here is, as an insight from a listed company like where I work for, the target employers probably that you are trying to get into their companies, you want to get an offer from, they're going through the same cycle, right? It might be called different, but the reality is that everyone is going to first a short-term contingency plan and assessing how much money do I have and how many months can I go without revenues. Second, I do an assessment on how it's going to be life after COVID. And this is what we've been seeing from investor mindsets. And the third thing, if things are not too gloomy for the specific subsector or whichever part of the finance industry you're in, then they are looking at how we're going to grow after this and how we go expansive. The third message here, thinking as a job seeker, is that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. As Tom said, I graduated in 08, 09. There was a very bad correction in the stock market. At that point, it was minus 55. And then it was an 11-year bull run in the US. It was not that big in Europe with some interruptions, but overall, the sun always comes up after a storm. Right now, it's a very strange time, no? If you have to compare it with weather. It rains, then you have a snowstorm, because then you have 30% rebound in the S&P, but you have weird things happening in the oil market. So there's a lot of volatility. It's very early to tell if we have already gone through the worst, but the reality is that after things stabilize, things go back to normal, and that will reflect in the job market. So let's go to the part of talking just before going into looking at the finance jobs. As I said, the parallel with my graduating in 2009 without a full-time job, it's very similar. Obviously, we didn't have the confinement, but what I can say is that you need to take the lemons and make lemonade, right? So I developed a very structured approach to this that helped me in the rest of my career. And I eventually end up landing the job I went to business school to get, which was trying to work for one of the most admired real estate private equity, which is Lone Star. So, but this has been on the basis of following through, being aware, taking a lot of coffees, and always be prepared for the next meeting or the next interview. So a couple of thoughts before we go into the content. So first, be active, be aware, don't stop thinking about opportunities. I'm talking about jobs, investing, new businesses, whichever status you're in. Take advantage of your existing network and your excellent schooling decision. So it's a good time, because you have extra time at home, to revisit and redraw your goals, to prepare your materials, drill, and go through an extra round of exercises. Network remotely. I will talk in a minute about that. And obviously, importantly, have an action plan for the day the lockdown is over. So let's start with the first part, which is maybe introductory for some of you that you're already into finance, when exactly you know where you want to go, but some of you might want to go into finance and still not clear. This is a very rough simplification. What I'm saying is that to make it quick and dirty, you have people that sell things and people that buy things. So if you're on the sell side, which is the upper two rows here, you're either in investment banking or other kind of advisory. And if you're on the buy side, you are in private investment or public investments. So I will just make it relatively introductory and brief. We can go into that into Q&A if you have more questions about it. There is a certain glorified aura about the private equity investment. Me coming from the private equity background, I must say there's some truth to that. But jokes aside, there's amazing careers and a lot of money to be made in either of these institutions that you can work for. So what is the situation of, like, investment banks? You can go into either investment banking, sales and trading, and research. These big institutions tend to overfire in this kind of crisis, and then they overhire. So what it means for a candidate joining the banks in 2020 or 2021 is that classes will be smaller. What this means is that if you manage to stay there, you have a lot more chances of succeeding. If you go into other advisors, you might have more opportunities, and especially center on restructuring. Restructuring is going to be the name of the game in many of the next few months. Talking about private investments, this is the private equity, or sometimes you can do private debt or anything that lies in the middle. There was plenty of dry powder before COVID. There's been an amazing shift of money stopping to chase public investments and going into alternatives like private equity is, or real estate private equity. These kind of firms, and most of you know, and most of you, because if you are in the private equity program, know that private equities tend to be pickier at the time of recruiting. They tend not to do so many open application kind of recruiting processes. But just it makes sense to keep on knocking the door, because they have a lot of dry powder and they will be doing a lot of investments. In this, I'm not saying that every one of you should be offering for free your work, which is very valuable, but be flexible and be ready to consider some options that might not pay in full or might be an unpaid internship. Think about it, that is adding value to your career. Last word on public investment, just to say that this volatility has been creating some of the best entry points in many sectors in 10 years. In terms of the pyramid that you always go to, many of you might be familiar with this, but it's worth remembering this is my view, but this is the general, how it's gonna look in any finance job that you land. You tend to have the analyst at the bottom of the pyramid. The analyst's job is basically to make no mistakes, be the king of modeling, and cope with a lot of overlapping responsibilities. Associates, which is the level as most of you will be joining after business school. The most important thing is that you should be autonomous to run parts of the processes and be ready to coordinate analysts and review their materials. VP principals are the kings of execution, and you start having origination opportunities. The directors are excellent communicators. They lead the teams, and they are on their clear path to be an MD or be a partner. And finally, the managing director or the partner is the rainmaker. Obviously, this pyramid, if you were a natural born banker or a natural born investor, it doesn't matter. But for all of us that are not that kind of persons, it's very good. It can be grueling at times, but it's intellectually and economically rewarding. One word of advice, either if you are joining as a summer intern or as a full-time associate, earn your analyst respect. In many cases, these guys have been there working for many years, and don't treat them like they are your slaves. Just, you better have your analyst on your side. Another thing I like to mention, throughout your finance career, many of you might have it already incorporated, but always is good to adhere to the principles of extreme ownership. This is one of my favorite authors and podcast guys lately. It's Jocko Willings, former Navy SEAL. His book on extreme ownership is amazing to apply in finance. No, like, just always be responsible and take responsibility for your acts. So let's go, assuming that you already are convinced and you're going to do finance. Let's work on that, something that is basic. Here, I'm not gonna be, this is not a career, like a goal setting seminar, no? But if you are in the mood for that, I recommend that you do the kind of goal setting seminars that Tony Robbins does, or that you pick up the book from Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Workweek, and redefine some of your career and life goals. But basically, the story underlines everything that you present, right? So given that you have some extra time at home, it's very good to make that assessment and think whether you are, your story makes sense, there's any inconsistencies, and how that in the end transpires, no? Whether your midterm goals are showing into what you present to people, what you tell in your CV, what you show in your LinkedIn profile, what you have in your cover letter. Elevator pitch, we're gonna touch it in the next slide. Let me tell you something on the elevator pitch then. The reality is that many of you should know, here we have David Solomon from Goldman Sachs, Henry Kravis from KKR, and then John Graken from Lone Star. This gentleman runs three of the finest firms in finance, blue blood bankers and private equity guys. Henry Kravis is a CBS alum himself and will be a name in one of the buildings of our next campus. But you might, it's real, you might be bumping into them the next time you're allowed to go into the streets or in the office and you do an elevator trip. That's why you should have like a 1 minute elevator pitch. I'm pretty sure that you guys have it because you've been already in Columbia at least for a few months, if not over a year, if you're a second year. But if you haven't, this is a very good opportunity to review it. And just as an example, I will just go through what I have when I was in Columbia. That was in late 2007 when I started doing recruiting. Most importantly, I got advice from the CMC, from alumni, from people from second year. You should show the rationale, that everything is consistent in your story, the decisions that you have been making, and this ends in today, then I want to do X, Y, or Z. So basically what I said back then, it was, I was born and raised in Argentina. After an undergrad in economics, I started a career in finance. At first, I worked for a small research firm covering Argentinian equities. I was getting a good exposure to clients, but I was not having transaction experience. While working there, I actually did a master's in finance and completed the CFA program. In order to improve my exposure to transactions, I moved to Pegasus Capital, which was the biggest private equity fund in the country. I was in the team that raised $250 million real estate fund from American institutional investor. And by the time it was mid-2007, I had $400 million of experience under my belt. I had an amazing time there, but I was lacking exposure to business conducted outside South America and working for bigger institutions. That's why I pursued a Columbia MBA in order to take my career to the next level and working, and then that was completed depending on who I was meeting. If it was a banker from the US, I was going to be talking about the banker in the US. I was going to be talking to the banker or the private equity guy in London to move there. So this was just an example, but remember, the elevator pitch is the teaser for that great product you're selling, which is yourself. Then let's go to the core of of what I learned in this now 12 years since I graduated. But we need to make our network grow. No? We Latin Americans are not natural born networkers. This is not a philosophical discussion, but the good news is that you can learn to network, and it's just not good. It's good not only for getting a finance job, but for anything across your professional life. So basically, at the center of all your networking effort, you should have a networking list, right? This should be a list with like your target companies and people that you know or might get introduced to in order to get to them. This should be an interactive tracker, because that what you can measure, you can improve. So, and this, I put there, be bold and creative, meaning that it's not only just go through LinkedIn or ask someone, just you need to spend serious time on making this grow and be on top of news flow. I will come across this story a couple of times just to make my point. But in the case when I moved to Lone Star, it was just after seeing something published in the press in Spain that was a deal about to be signed. I reached out to an old acquaintance that was at Lone Star, and that less than a month afterwards, I was working with Lone Star. So you need to be on top of the news flow. It will be easier once you already started and you got traction and you are very much on top of the news flow and see which companies are active in what things. Then you have a coffee, then you have more ideas. So, but this is just, it compounds. No, I say that at the end of this. But this, you need to be serious about this. It's almost another job. You need to reach out. If you're a bit shy, try to get rid of that shyness. It might be very valid that you should get yourself in a position to call JP Morgan headquarters and try to get to Jamie Dimon. That kind of test yourself, challenge your limits, because only out of that, you're going to get that internship or that full-time job that is not that obvious. No, like we would all love to have all the options open in Coin or whichever was the system to apply for jobs. But unluckily, not everyone is posting there. So just do all these efforts that I'm mentioning here so that you can get to your desired job. Make it face-to-face as much as possible and one coffee at a time whenever you can. Today, with the COVID, go for video calls, but you might be drinking your coffee at home or it's decaf. Find a mentor. That's important, just not only as getting advice from someone that is a bit more senior than you, it's a bit ahead of you in the career, or it's someone 20 years ahead of you, or you get advice from the executives in residence. And the important thing is, if you make it systematic, a senior mentor will provide discipline so that you know that the next time you go to the mentor, you need to come with progress, right? So my goal is that after today, you feel compelled to send another WhatsApp message, send an email, prepare better your template for the next interaction, reach out and try to have a call or video call, because by following through, you get the benefit of a power of compounding. Because you did this today, then tomorrow you might have 2 calls, and then 4, and then 8. So that's very important. Talking about networking and some etiquette here. Let's talk about if you have the meeting, but in these times you can only have a video or a phone call. Important things, number 1, have an agenda and try to stick to 30 minutes. Even when they allow for 45 minutes, respect the time of someone that is giving their time. Second thing is be on time. If you are supposed to call at 10 a.m., call at 10 a.m., not at 10:05. Research the host. In this era, it's like unacceptable not to research and know about them. Show respect and ask for advice. And obviously, as the conversation evolves, ask if that company is looking for candidates. Ask if it's okay to send your CV so that he or she can give you advice on it. And ask if it's okay to add them to LinkedIn. That's an amazing way of getting more view on who you can target next. Okay. Other important aspects, always short and professional communication. I know that all of you guys are professional, you are in Colombia, but remember this, everything is a reflection of you as a candidate. So no typos, please. It should be respect, but not cold or distant. One important thing that I've been getting questions from people in Spain or London, it is okay to reach out during COVID-19 times. Obviously, if you have some information that the person you're trying to reach out is enduring a tough moment with family or health issues, like just don't overdo it. But a respectful email, no one should be very angry if a business school student sends a respectful email to try and grow his network and get his job, right? Importantly, when you have done the call or the video call, the thank you note. The thank you note is amazing. A lot of people forget about it. That night or the following day, send the follow-up emails thanking for their time. And this is not the end in any case. Put something in your calendar to follow up in X time. It might be weeks now that everything is very weird, or it might be 6 months, because again, coming back to my Lone Star story, it was 6 years of coffees. After 6 years of coffees, I end up like joining Lone Star. So now let's talk about the interview process, but as with like CVs, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here. You have people at the Career Management Center, which are the best, but I will say a few things. Your profile or whatever is in your CV, explicit or implicit, is fair game for a question, so know it by heart. Secondly, you always, and not only during COVID times, there are no shortcuts to preparation. So if you have more time at home, use it to know and exercise all those tough questions. No? Are you new to the industry? Just learn the jargon, be up to date, speak with insiders. Research your potential employers or people that are going to be interviewing you after the lockdown. Practice the tough questions, and this is not silly, but record them and listen to them. I used to do that a lot. I used to go, when in London, I was commuting and listening to my answers to tough questions time and time again. And then it just flows naturally during interviews. As I said, practice make perfect. So do as many mock interviews as you can. This is very important. Use your classmates, use like friends, your partner, use the Career Management Center, whomever can role play, and ask them to be as tough as possible so that when a tough interviewer comes, you are prepared. Then some last minute recommendations. Hype up, and for this you can use whichever thing works for you. I can share with you what I used to do and in the Hell Week of 2007, 2008. I used to watch the inspirational speech by Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday, and then followed by 2 Armin van Buuren electronic music trance sets, and then I was ready to go and eat the world. So that's, do whatever you want, but come with the right level of energy, because they need to see someone full of energy. You're not just concerned about this or that. Just boom, go full of energy, deliver your message, and then if they like you, great. If not, let's move to the next. Importantly, show up and show up on time. Be yourself, your very confident self. So this is like a bonus. The first part is obvious, and this is not even a bonus. You should have a view on this crisis. Don't overread. Don't try to see all of the news, the potentially sources for news. Just pick a few sources, stick to them, and have your view, because it will come time and time again in all the interactions you will have. Then what I'm mentioning here is that you should develop, even when you're not going into public equities and you're not in CIMA, it's a good idea to have an idea on a public investment or a private investment. Why? Because this is a very good way of maybe first making money. It helps you challenge your own assumptions, because in these days, your investment thesis disappears in a couple hours. Third, because in these times, it's very good to show initiative and you have extra time in your hands. So you can start by, if it's a public idea, pick up the latest annual and the latest COVID-19 update, write down the equity story, analyze the COVID impact for the company, the sector. If you're a modeling fund, build your own full valuation model. and set the entry point, catalyst, stop losses, and investment horizon. Practice your pitch, and if it's a real listed company, put some money where your mouth is, and then that would be a nice point of discussion with your potential interviewers or people they are doing informational interviews with. So we are just in time for the starting of the Q&A. Let me finish this by saying that I truly believe in the systematic approach. This has been a kind of compressed version, but I truly believe in this systematic approach. I was born in a middle-class family in Buenos Aires with no history or connections to finance. Applying this method, making mistakes along the way and learning a lot. It took me from Argentina to CBS, to London and to Madrid. And in the process, I worked for the finest banks and funds I could hope for, and wait for the best, making some serious money along the way. So, takeaways that I want to leave with you. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. Use your lockdown time to increase your value as a finance candidate. Polish your marketing materials, make your network grow, practice your interviewing skills, develop an investment idea, and remember the power of compounding. Like every day that you do something, you are you're having an edge on yourself from yesterday. So imagine if you do that for a full year, you have a lot more, your list is gonna be much bigger. Second to last, you are at the top school, okay? Top business school, and you only need one job at a time, so don't be that negative. And this too shall pass. So thank you very much for your time. And now hopefully we'll go through some questions that came in through the chat.
Great. Thank you, Johnny. So I would encourage participants, please put chats into the Q&A box and we'll pick those up as they come in. Johnny, one question that came through, and certainly we hear often, is about the great faculty, both full-time faculty and adjuncts at the business school and at a place like Columbia being in the center of business in New York. Can you comment on how to leverage the faculty?
Look, I got one of the best pieces of advice from Will Dugan. I cannot remember which course I was taking, but obviously I was the typical finance private equity background guy, which thought that what can I get from a strategy professor? But he actually sat down with me and explained to me probably the essence of the philosophic approach that I explained today. So you want something, so have something to tell whomever you're going to have a coffee next, and then do that the next time you make your network grow. So this was kind of a surprise thing. But then the other obvious things is when you go to your advanced corporate finance professor and say, okay, look, I have this problem, A, B, C, D, and then they will help you. The one, I would say like one thing that is probably obvious, but I will remember everyone, we should not think that faculty will give you a job, right? I remember we had like Jeff Harris from Venture Capital that says, if you expect me to give you a job at Warburg Pincus, forget about it. That's not going to happen. If you come to me asking for advice, and you explain your case, like, look, I want to do this, this is my background, these are my sticky points when I go to it, they can help you and they will be very happy to help you. But obviously you don't let your anxiety be on top if you are reaching out by email, don't put like something like, okay, you need to help me get my job. Just use them delicately, like obviously they have to give time to all of the students. But if you have if they see that there's a lot of work and you're struggling and they know that there are difficult times, they will always be ready to do that, sit down that extra 10 minutes or whatever time it takes to help you direct your efforts. Or something like, again, you have a lot of time in your hands, they can direct you, okay, you know what, read this or read that, or follow this thinker, or follow that investor. This thing is one of the most valuable things. And sometimes in the class, they cannot be pointing, okay, you should, this is my recommended list for reading. But use them for that. It's like, but again, as if you were going to have a coffee with someone outside faculty, when you reach out to them, go there well prepared. Have an agenda. Don't go there and say, okay, advise me. It's like, yeah, what are I gonna do?
Great, thanks, Johnny. In your opinion, what are some of the similarities and the differences between COVID-19, our current situation, and the 2008 crisis from a networking perspective?
Well, the first thing that is very different is that today you cannot go out and take coffees, right? Like you have physically, most of the world, a lot of the Western world is like closed, shut down. But I must say that the feeling in 2008, 2009 was that you couldn't even get to the people because people were frightened, same as now, like they might be frightened for their own job, right? So people were sometimes responding less, or when you meet with people, they were not as helpful, maybe because they were stressed. So this is, in a way, is very similar. My comment to that is, yeah, we are all humans. And obviously there's, except for the super exceptional human beings that have the big picture, they have every right to be stressed, but you have every right to be reaching out to people and trying to grow your network. So keep doing it. There are a couple things of, I think that it goes by this kind of unprecedented crisis that affects the whole world is something very new. And so I think that everyone today is viewing the world with their traditional bias. So if you're an optimistic person, you'll be optimistic. And if you're a pessimist, you're going to be a pessimist. No? So what I mean is just try to look for the optimistic people. Just knock enough doors so that you get enough optimistic people on the other side of the line. Because and don't get discouraged when someone pessimistic is on the other side of the line. It's fine. Just take advice, take whatever you can get from them, and that's it. But the reality is that networking never seems easy, even in booming times. It's very easy today, if I was in your shoes, to be discouraged. But again, as long as you have health, this too shall pass. And actually, if you are doing the extra mile and you have done a lot of work at home and you have a plan for the day you are finally liberated, you're going to get, and again, you need one job at a time, right? So just keep drilling, reach out to the CMC, use all the resources that Columbia gives you, because networking is always guerrilla style. This is something that you should remember. It's always guerrilla style.
Great. How do you ask someone to mentor you?
Well, a mentor, you should have some relationship, right? So it can either be a former boss, a former professor, or a professor that you have a good relationship now at Columbia. They might be open to that. Because if I'm mentioning that you should have some kind of relationship because it's very strange to go reach out to someone that you don't know and say, hey, I want you to be my mentor. Because if someone takes seriously being a mentor, he or she will devote serious time. So I would start with like some existing relationship, then have a very well-crafted message. I am not, as I said at the beginning, I'm not a natural born networker. I was an introvert when I was a kid. So I was never the kind of guys picking up the phone and doing sales calls because I hated it. But I'm always preparing with bullet points when I have a phone call. So that might be a good thing. I would ask for the mentorship, I would ask in person if possible, or if not, on the phone or a video phone. And prepare that. It's okay to have like 3 bullets and sound like a robot. It's fine. But at least you prepare. Otherwise, you're going to be rambling and going to this and that because the market, just very clear. Unlike me, that I'm a Latino, but I learned that thanks to Columbia. Look, 3 messages, boom, like make efficient use of everyone's time.
Great. Johnny, can you recommend a few good sources of news or podcasts?
Well, yeah, like I've been, I must say, I have a 3-year-old. So and I've been trying to set up a side business at the same time I'm working. So I don't have a lot of reading time itself, but I'm using a lot of time at the gym at listening to podcasts. In terms of, before going to podcasts, sorry, what I've been reading lately passionately is the letter by Howard Marks from Oaktree. Now it comes weekly. He used to write whenever he felt there was something worth writing, but now he's writing almost every week, and it's an amazing and insightful thing. Other than that, I only read The Economist. I tend to follow The Economist, and that's all I read. But obviously, I recommend that if you're in the US, follow Wall Street Journal. If you're in London, follow the Financial Times. The main sources, you need to be on top of the big news, at least the headlines. And in terms of podcasts, there's a number I became passionate about. But like, as I mentioned them, I mentioned Tim Ferriss throughout the conversation. This is an amazing podcast on top class performers of anything, from LeBron James to doctors to Tony Robbins himself. So it's amazing. Jocko Willink, this former Navy SEAL, is another amazing podcast. Invest Like the Best from Patrick O'Shaughnessy, mostly about investing. Then it's Value Investing at Columbia with Tano Santos. That's also some publicity for our school, which is amazing. You have like value investing legends. So for those of you interested in value investing, that's another very good podcast. And I could go on for hours, but I must say, like, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to go through other few.
Great. Johnny, so we've gotten a few questions along a similar topic. How long do you think this crisis can take to normalize and companies will get ready to hire associates again? Some students are flirting with the idea of maybe taking a leave of absence, maybe registering for a dual degree in order to push back graduation by a year.
Yeah. Look, I would say I have this conversation with some students here in Spain, where they have the option of extending the MBA and doing it. Look, I think that both options are fine. The option of, okay, I'm ready, I'm John Rambo, I'm gonna go out in this moment and I'm gonna get my job regardless of the situation. That might be tough in the short term, but as I said in one of the slides, the classes that are joining in 2020 are gonna be smaller because of this big crisis and companies are scaling back. So if you manage to get in, your chances of success are much higher. Obviously, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. You need to be ready and psychologically prep up, be on top form, because you might need to deal with a lot of weeks of rejection until you get your job. The other option, it's good. But what I say, if you take the option, I'm going to do a dual degree, great. That's good. Like education is never bad. It's never going to harm you. What I recommend is that you do not do the kind of easy thing of laying back. Okay, now I'm a student. I'm not concerned about looking for a job. What I strongly suggest is that you try to get a school year internship. Regardless of, like, the market is very bad, it doesn't matter. Keep on drilling as if you had the need to get a job. Because I did that in my first year at Columbia. I did a school year internship with Oxif, a hedge fund. And that was very good. And I spent like 1 day a week there going to their office, but it helped me be connected to the real world. Try to do that, because it might make your life easier when you finally graduate. And yes, the economy might have been, by then it might have rebounded. And my view is that the Anglo-Saxon world is going to have the V-shaped recovery. But if you, in these months, manage to get a school year internship or try to do something associated with a real employer, you will have a big advantage. So don't rely only on being protected and being cozy at school. Just try to get something during that year.
Great. You know, along similar lines, Johnny, how do you approach a target when the first response has already been, we're not hiring? people are obviously in times like this, sometimes less responsive because either they're putting out fires or they're dealing with personal or difficult situations. How do you recommend staying on top without insisting too much when your contacts may be less responsive than you'd like?
Yeah, look, I think that the first thing is that yes, a person at one company might say that. My approach is try to get another door. Okay, just try to get a different investment professional or reach out to the human resources. But if in the end it's your top companies, the top goal is to join them, just do a lot of research, see which other entry points you have, some people that you can get introduced to, and look, it might be real that they are not hiring at all, but at least you will get a lot of intel. Okay, so be on top of that, because that might result in them pointing out that some company X, Y, or Z, they're actually hiring, or really you might be in line first for whenever the opportunity comes to hire you. So don't insist always on the same person, because they have every right to then be angry at you. But then you can go to a colleague or someone else that you were introduced to and keep on learning about the company. Because part of this, what I've discussed today, is like, okay, you as a candidate trying to go on and please what the employer sees, right? But remember that this is a two-way thing, and you should be convinced that you want to work with them. So the more information you can have, even when it might be that the case that today or for the next 3 months, they are not going to be hiring. That cannot be changed. But at least, look, maybe you confirm that it's your top choice, or actually you discarded it because you don't like them. So in any case, it will be useful.
Great. Johnny, what about candidates who are older? If people have had some significant work experience in a different sector and they're now trying to pivot into finance, can you share any examples, or what kind of advice or recommendations would you have for people who've been successful a little bit later in their careers, making a pivot into finance? Is it even possible?
Yes. Look, I think that as in anything, that my experience is that as a person filtering CVs, you're always looking for the excuse to say no, right? And so this is a very obvious excuse. If I'm looking for an associate, and you are not 25 years old after doing your 3 years in Goldman Sachs and then doing your MBA or something like that, I reject you. These are like in good times. But the reality is that networking is very good, because by networking, by having this informational interview or this coffee, whenever you're allowed to go out there, you can connect really to people, and they can see your experience. And it might be the case that you were in management, you were running small companies or mid-sized companies, and you had to go through the previous crisis, or you have to do a merger. These kind of things, you might not know it, but you did it. And then what happens? Finance makes it sound very nice and sophisticated and so, but you might have all the experience of being on the ground, running teams, dealing with the regular person. That's something that I've been doing in the last 4 years, working more in the management and day-to-day of people outside of my finance bubble. It's challenging. So this is very valuable for when you can use both hats. Like the Main Street hat of running companies and being managing a team of whatever 50 average citizen. This is a skill that in general, for anyone that has been all his life or her life in finance, they might not have it. So the problem is that if you are going only through the official line of recruiting that asks you to put a CV and a letter and a cover letter, yeah, they might be rejecting you, but using the networking, it's probably the best option to do that, no? Like, because you will get the chance to explain what you can add. And look, again, it might be that you also convince yourself that you do not want to do finance, because what you see is not for your liking.
Mm-hmm. You know, along similar lines, we're getting a few questions along this similar theme. If you were recently deciding to make a transition to finance, what would be your first step?
I think that the first step is to do a much deeper search than what I described here, which was a very rough simplification, no? To understand what you can do in finance, because you can, whatever you can imagine in developed markets and deep developed markets like the US, you can be a specialist in anything that you can imagine, both selling and buying, no? Like on sell side and buy side. So the first thing is to probably try to get connected with people from that they do buy side and sell side, have conversations, have good questions, like real honest questions, not like ingenious questions, because you are coming from outside, and try to get them answered. Like if you're an outsider, no one can think that you are stupid because you're asking something, but ask the honest question. Just try to understand. Because if you speak with a banker, then you speak with a guy in sales, then you speak with a trader, then you speak with a hedge fund guy, then with a private equity guy, then with a family office guy, someone with CMBS, they will give you their view, and that should lead you into deciding whether you want to do and what you want to do. Then, yes, you can buy the vault guides or speak with whomever gives you like structured thing, but my feeling is that you can only learn by being connected to persons, because persons can tell you what their career as a banker is, or what their career as a private equity guy is, filled with anecdotes. That is the only way, in my mind, or how I did it, was how I understood what I wanted to do. Because someone came and told me, well, I do this, and then I spent X years in New York, and then I spent X years in London. I said, I want to do that. Okay, what? Tell me more. How are the working hours? Is it real that you have all weekends working? Is it? Yes, you can read it in the Vault guide, but it's much better to be connected, either because they are Columbia alums or because you have people in common. Get the introductions and get those video calls or phone calls.
Great. Along similar lines to that, Johnny, what are the best channels for networking with people outside of your personal or your school networks? Any recommendations?
Look, it can be in the very, they are very varied. Like if I take the example of Spain here, depending on the traditions of each country, no? But there's a lot of networking and deals being done in the football field, that you go to see Real Madrid, and before the match and after the match, or during the halftime, you are talking there and doing business, or in the bullfighting rings, or I like cigars, and then there's a big club of real estate people and cigars, which we gather every few months. But it's always good. Again, at the risk of being repetitive, this only comes out of speaking with people. Obviously, you're not going to sit in the first informational interview and ask someone, okay, which clubs do you go to, or how can I get my access to this? But it will flow, because if you have that in your list of questions, maybe at the end of it, if you see how the conversation is flowing, it's like, hey, do you recommend me to read this magazine or follow that podcaster? And this, you will start like sniffing where things are happening and what these kind of people do, or where do they go.
Great. I would piggyback on that. One piece of advice that I received long ago that I've heard often said in the world of career management is that each piece of data, each person you speak to, is just one data point. And the important thing is to identify trends and patterns and see if there are common themes that come up repeatedly.
Yeah.
And that makes it useful the more people that you speak to.
Totally. And that's why I insist on the power of compounding. No, you follow through. Then, my experience is when I moved to London, I had like around 10 contacts, real contacts of people, friends or friends of friends working in top private equity funds. when I moved from London to Madrid 5 years after that, I had like 500 contacts, real contacts with all kinds of seniorities, headhunters, bankers, private equity guys, hedge fund guys, and it compounded over time. And this is not all the people I met. I met a lot more people, but I'm talking about the contacts, the people I know that I can reach out, and I know them.
Great. Johnny, given the current situation, the current crisis, do you think it's a good idea to focus on restructuring, either if you've done it in the past or not, as a way of having a useful skill, either for summer internship or for after graduation?
Yeah, totally. I think that this is something that will happen. Hopefully, as I said at the beginning, hopefully the fiscal response is enough to not have so many companies going under. But the reality is that we might see a lot of this, like already happening in hotels and anything that has to do with tourism. But we will see a lot of consolidations and restructurings happening. So if you have done that in the past, brush up your notes, review your models from your previous jobs. If you haven't done it, just take a look. There's a lot of materials to be checked in the Columbia Library. Talk with classmates that may come from a banking restructuring sector, or people that come from advisories doing just restructuring, because there's going to be, that's my feeling, what happened in 2008-9, firms like Houlihan Lokey or some other specialized banks that only do restructuring, they are booming. I mean, they will have a lot of work to do. And this might be, it might not be as shiny as joining, say, a Goldman Sachs or a Lone Star or a Blackstone or a KKR. But my personal experience is that doing restructuring sets the tone and it teaches you a lot of lessons for the rest of your career. So when I moved to London, I joined Deutsche Bank, and I was for almost 5 years doing restructuring of what had happened and was a set of bad investments in 2008. Yes, it was not sexy. I complained a lot, but I learned a lot. And it prepared, and it set the tone for the rest of my career. So restructuring is a good idea. And don't be fixated on the idea that you had before joining business school, because that might be a different business plan. It disappeared, it might have been pushed back, or it might never come back. As I said yesterday to Tom and Greta, I had a 10-year plan that never materialized. My life had nothing to do after business school, but I'm very happy with it. So be flexible, and restructuring can be your door to joining that company, or maybe it's the next step. But as I said, one job at a time. So focus on getting that next job, and then the sun will come up again.
Johnny, we do want to be respectful of your time and the time of the participants on the call, so we should wrap it up. We're coming up to the top of the hour. Thank you so much for your willingness to share your perspective and experience with us today. We greatly appreciate it.
Well, thanks to you for having me. Always a pleasure to come back, at least virtually, to Columbia. Whenever travel is possible, I will be there again. And yeah, as I said, like, reach out. Very happy to help as much as I can. And see you next time.
Wonderful. And to all the participants and students on the call, thank you for your time today.
Yes, thank you very much. And if some of you want to join, we have another webinar tonight if you're interested at 8 p.m. So we're going all day here with Tim Campos from formerly from Facebook, now from Calendar Startup Woven, class of 2011. He'll be talking about remote workplace. So you can sign up for that on the Private Equity Program website.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Bye.
Thank you.